can bring us up to date. What's just happened in that chamber there, Nick?
Yeah, after we heard from the Syrian ambassador, the council then moved to a vote. They were voting on a brand new draft resolution that the Russians presented to the council today. It wasn't expected to pass, and unsurprisingly, it did not pass. This was a resolution which had very, very strong language in it, condemning that strike by the US, the UK and French, and saying that the strikes were in violation of international law and UN Charter. For a UN resolution to pass, it needs 9 votes in favour out of the 15 members who are voting. It only managed to achieve 3 votes in favour, 8 against and 4 abstentions, and there were several vetoes from the US, the UK and France, all permanent members able to veto, and they vetoed it. So it's another resolution that has been struck down this week, the 4th over the last few days. There were 3 others on Tuesday which also failed to pass, not getting enough votes or being vetoed by the permanent members.
Nick, we just heard from the Syrian ambassador there at the UN Security Council, not surprisingly condemning the actions against his country, talking about US imperialism. When it came to the American and the Russian ambassadors, we got the usual stuff. Nikki Haley was saying that Russia gives a green light to the Syrian regime to use these sorts of chemical weapons. The Russian ambassador said that the US panders to terrorists by launching these airstrikes against Bashar al-Assad. But we spoke about an hour ago. Let's go over this particular line that came from the French ambassador, because he appeared to be one of the very few to talk about a political transition in Syria and talking about an exit strategy for countries that are involved in Syria. It didn't seem as if too many others were talking about that kind of change that needs to happen in Syria in the future, because this needs to be resolved eventually. We're into an 8th year.
That's right. Francois Delattre, the French ambassador to the United Nations, making really a strong assertion that was not picked up by other countries, talking about the possibility of change at the top in Syria, getting rid of the current president, Bashar al-Assad. Now, that is something that the Russians have accused the Western nations of throughout, that all of this, the talking, the resolutions, the desire to have a chemical weapons team, these strikes against various different sites in Syria, it's all to do with wanting regime change. That has been the accusation from Russia throughout. So it was very interesting to hear what seemed to be, for the first time, unveiled comments by the French ambassador. The US not really taking quite that line. I'm sure it's something that is at the back of everybody's minds, especially the UK, France, the US, wanting to have some way forward and thinking that if Bashar al-Assad is no longer in power, then that would perhaps be the simplest way forward. So strong assertions from the French, the Russians shooting back that, of course, that is what they've always wanted to do, and perhaps unsurprised that they were hearing language like that from the French ambassador.
And what was said about these inspectors from the OPCW, the Organisation for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons? They are in Syria. They were supposed to begin their investigation in Duma today, Saturday. Anything said about them?
Well, the OPCW, they put out a statement first thing on Saturday saying that they would be continuing with their mission. They've been quite cagey about giving the exact details of where they would be and when they would be there due to security concerns. So it's unclear if they were going to travel to Duma in light of these airstrikes overnight. But they will remain in the country, they will continue with their mission, and they will continue to do the chemical weapons testing. But as you would expect, the Russians and the Syrians raising very serious questions as to why the Western nations are carrying out these airstrikes when the OPCW is not only in the country, but not yet having carried out its investigation or presented any sort of results. The Syrian ambassador, Bashar Jafari, spoke about this, saying that some of the sites that were targeted during the airstrikes had already been cleared by the OPCW on a previous mission, and that these 3 locations that were bombed, really that was information that should have been shared with the OPCW rather than striking them and wiping them out. So serious questions raised as to why these strikes took place and the particular timing of them.
Nick Harper in New York. Thank you, Nick.